Hi, I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine, your host for the Civics Connection. We are going to talk about membership in a majority and minority party while serving in Congress. Joining me are Democrat Charles Melancon, who represented southeastern Louisiana from 2005 to 2011, and Republican Bill Zeliff, who represented eastern New Hampshire from 1991 to 1997. Congressman Melancon, let's start with you. What are the advantages and disadvantages of political party membership, and how do they impact the distribution of power while serving in Congress?
Well, I guess if I had to start and go back to my roots in Louisiana, we didn't really look at party affiliation. It was more about the factions within the House of Representatives and whose interest and where they were. And so we just kind of came together when it was time to negotiate legislation. Was there a good time and a bad time? Being in the minority is fun because you don't have any responsibility to show up and take leadership and forge the agenda or set the tone or in any way, shape, or form. So you can throw hand grenades all day. And I think Bill will probably tell you some of that. I mean, it was easier, but at the same time, maybe somewhat more frustrating. But in the times when I was in the legislature where we knew we could get things done when they had to get done, being in the minority, whether it was in the State House or in the Congress of the United States, actually were a lot less pressure, I guess, if I had to state it that way.
And Congressman Zeliff, how would you respond to the same question?
Well, I think being in the majority is everything.
Okay.
I was in the minority, and we were the backbenchers, and we created a lot of problem. We didn't have the accountability that you would have in a majority because majority you're responsible. But majority gives you the opportunity. What you do with that opportunity is up to you. But I also believe in working across the aisle, and I've always done that. Anybody that tells me that, I don't have to work across the aisle because I'm in a majority certainly limits their ability to get a lot of major things done. Mm-hmm. You need both sides of the aisle to make it really work.
Absolutely. Now, Congressman Zeliff, could you describe, you talked about being in the majority is everything, but could you describe two additional advantages beyond the numerical advantage that being in the majority party actually brings to members of the majority party?
Well, let's put it this way. If you play it right, mm-hmm. You take some good ideas, you really want to, your goal is to accomplish something major. If you can get, because you're in the majority party, and if you have good influence with the Senate side, you can get the Senate to help work your body because eventually it's going to be over there as well. Mm-hmm. You can get the administration to weigh in. Eventually you have nobody against you, and you can work together and get some really good things done.
Even if people are throwing hand grenades at you.
Even though the backbenchers,
yeah.
like Charles and I both have been, are constantly doing their little thing.
Yeah.
But somehow, if you're smart, you'll get them involved as well. So the bottom line here is really making it work by getting everybody included. And unfortunately, that's not what they're doing today.
Right. Now, Congressman Melancon, in terms of what you talked about before about leadership, so what kind of leadership opportunities are there that are not formal but more informal for members of the majority party?
Well, from a majority standpoint, mm-hmm. And I guess it's a matter of in these days and times, I'm a Southern Democrat. It means mm-hmm. I'm a bit more conservative than my counterparts on the East Coast, West Coast. So it was difficult for me from a standpoint of I had Katrina, Rita, Gustav Ike, and the BP oil spill. I was always in need of help for things, and then of course when we went into the majority, there was a kind of an understanding that it should be carte blanche, that I'd be there to cooperate whenever they wanted. But at the same time, my constituency being the nature it is, I had to tell them up front that I couldn't always be an assured vote just because I was a Democrat, that my constituency came first, but then also my responsibility to representative government, and that's making sure that they're represented. So there were some of the people that were in leadership, that the Steny Hoyers and the John Larsons, that understood that and gave me some leeway in that respect. There were others, go unnamed, that on the other hand weren't appreciative of it at all. So it can be trying. That's why I'm saying when you're not in the leadership, you have some flexibility to kind of maneuver. And after these storms, particularly Katrina, I worked in the state legislature in Louisiana. Not so much that I did a couple of good pieces of legislation, but the things that I did the best for my constituency was to put the one-liners in, or to put the paragraph into a bill that was moving through the process, to take care of issues or things that mattered to me and negotiate those things. So it was working behind the scenes, low profile. If you've built the relationships across the aisles and within your own party, those are the kind of things you can get done and quietly get more done effectively than if you got to depend on the leadership saying, okay, we're going to let your bill move now, but you owe us on the next set of votes. So there's some play there that I enjoy in that respect.
Now, in terms of these kinds of things, Congressman Zeliff, did you find that status as being a majority or minority party member was that you were reminded of it frequently? You talked about sort of working together and working across the aisle, but do you also work across this notion about sort of who has the advantages and who has those disadvantages above the numerical majority?
No, that was never anything that I dealt with. You don't have to that doesn't give you anything extra. It's the way you work that really counts. And I agree with Charles on it's access. It's the relationships you build. I can remember as a deputy whip, I had 92 people I was responsible for on the East Coast. And the first thing I did with my Democratic counterpart, invited he and his wife up to my inn for the weekend. And so we worked together on the floor. Even though, I was looking for an aye, he was looking for an nay, why can't you work together? And I also had a bunch of Democrats, conservative Democrats like Charles, that I knew were conservative vote, and they were going to vote with us. And so I knew where they were. And on our vote and a D vote have equal value. So I just think that people who don't work that way are missing out on a lot.
And you were talking about, and I want both of you to answer this question just as a follow-up, you were both talking about sort of things being different in the 21st century. And would you mind sort of following up on that point a little bit?
Well, the civility is lost. When the Congress started going home every weekend, and I used John Breaux and Trent Lott, Mississippi, Louisiana members of Congress in the House, went in the same class, moved their families up to Washington, lived in the same neighborhoods, their kids were raised together, played football and cheerleading, that kind of stuff. There was a relationship. Trent Lott could go to John Breaux when he needed to get something into a bill that he thought was good, and John could help him. And vice versa, get votes to bring for John's legislation if he had something to do. As they went through their careers, they didn't attack each other. They attacked the issue. They took it on, they debated it fiercely. At home on weekends, they discussed it. But when they were on the floor, they never called each other out. And what's changed now is you'll see members that'll go to the floor and call other members out. That will destroy any potential for a relationship or getting consensus for issues. It just divides. And that's kind of one of the things that I think that Bill agreed with that. That's the frustration. I went to Washington in anticipation, not because I had a planned career. As a matter of fact, I got elected when I was 64, so I got elected when I was 58. So it was kind of late in life. I made the decision to run for Congress, thinking, okay, I was a consensus builder in the State House. Maybe there's enough of us go up there, we can do the same thing in Washington. And it's difficult. The framing of the way the rules and the way the conduct of the order of the days are, it just doesn't lend itself as readily. Let Bill speak to some of that.
Well, I agree with everything Charles has said, and the only thing I would add, when you travel together, whether it's a Cordell or whatever, and the husbands and wives, number one, I can remember when I went to Israel. My wife and I went, and I learned more about that whole region and some of the issues that we had to deal with. Plus, the people I went with, I got to know intimately. And you have a different attitude towards people if you like them as friends. And I think all of a sudden, there will be leadership that will come forth to solve this problem that we have now But it's got to start somewhere, and it should start on both sides. And there's no room for being so hostile. And there is a lot of room, and the debt thing is a good example. I know John Boehner well. I know that he's going to have to figure out a way to get with the president, and they're going to have to bring Reid into it, and they're going to have to bring McConnell into it before those guys can provide the leadership to make it happen. And if they want to, and they have to, for the best interest of the country.
Well, and that's like the stories you hear about Tip O'Neill and President Reagan.
Absolutely.
They said they'd sit down up in Tip O'Neill's office and have a drink of beer or scotch or whatever it is and talk about the agenda and what needed to get done.
Right.
And that's what's not happening, is the sitting down of, and Bill expressed to me the story about Steny Hoyer, why don't you and Boehner just disappear for 3 hours and go talk to each other?
I actually mentioned that to him a couple of weeks ago.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, it's one of those things where they probably get more. Just get away from their constituents are the members of their caucus, and get away from them and go have a discussion. The biggest thing that they've heard or they probably have to overcome is shedding their staffers who want to protect them from each other and make sure that they're not doing something that might give them bad press. But to me, going to meet privately and having just private discussions about where we are, what we need to do, what's wrong with the system, whatever, is probably more positive than any of the stuff that I've seen going on in the last several years.
So it sounds to me, just to sort of summarize this theme of the discussion, that it's those friendships that are deeper and more firmly entrenched, and therefore when you do switch from being a member of the majority party to the minority party or vice versa, that may change, but the friendships don't change.
Access is everything. When you really think about it.
Yeah.
If we were all advising young people, we'd probably say, you know, access, keep a good Rolodex, being able to speak on your feet. There's a lot of good advice we can give. Same thing here. The friends that you make are great friends, and they can carry you. They can carry you forward to whatever problem you might have.
Right.
And you just can't you can't be vicious towards each other. You have to have more and more friends.
Right.
I had a friend of mine make the statement the other day. He says, in politics, it used to be who you know and what you know, but in these days and times, it appears to be more about what you know on who you know.
Oh.
Right.
Which is a sad commentary.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, somebody used to say, you know, if you can't say something good about somebody, don't say it.
Right.
Well, maybe we try to put that one back in more use.
Absolutely. Now, I'd like to talk about a group of people that have a very, very hard time getting elected to Congress, and that's independents and members of minority parties. When members of the major parties have so much advantage in Congress, there are many who are critical that it's very difficult then for independents and members of third parties to become members of Congress. And they say, consequently, the notion of democratic representation is negatively impacted. How do you respond to this criticism?
I'd say it's just in reverse. I served from New Hampshire, and Bernie Sanders is from Vermont.
Yes.
He's done very well for himself. He's now in the Senate. And I think if I were him, and I'm not, but if I were him, I would look for the opportunity to put a spotlight on what I represent, and I would get a better shot than either Republicans or the Democrats in terms of getting publicity, in terms of getting a spotlight. So I don't think that holds water. I really don't.
Okay.
Well,
and how about you?
I don't tend to totally agree there. As a person that, being a blue dog Democrat, I was more an independent than I was a true Democrat. When I ran for the U.S. Senate and I went up to the East Coast and to the West Coast to raise money, they looked at me like some weird animal because I wasn't a true Democrat to them. I was a Southern Democrat, the old Boll Weevil group and that kind of thing. We didn't march to the same drummer, but we had a lot of the same consensus of why we're Democrats, and it's about helping people that can't help themselves, I guess, if you've got to put it encapsulated. But as an independent, to go out and try and raise the money, at least from a Louisiana perspective, the Democrats are looking for a Democrat, the Republicans are looking for a Republican, and until such time, and then what happens is, I've told some of my friends, because they said, why don't you just run as an independent, because you have to commit to affiliate with whichever party. So if you're not going to be an independent and have to align with one of the two caucuses, then you haven't in fact been an independent. So it's I understand where he's coming from, but I take a little different slant, having been the newer of the elected officials. Times have changed from when you and Bernie started running.
Well, just got to look for opportunities wherever they are.
That's
I think,
it.
at the end.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, gentlemen, this has been such a fascinating discussion, but that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining me. I've been speaking with Congressman Charles Melancon, who represented southeastern Louisiana from 2005 to 2011, and Republican Bill Zeliff, who represented eastern New Hampshire from 1991 to 1997. I'm Dr. Terry Susan Fine, and this has been the Civics Connection.